added in an extra size compared to normal just because
you're going to actually drop the main colour yarn. There you have your front panel all done.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Georgia. I'm a knit and crochet designer, and today I'm so excited to be bringing you the Crochet Rudolph Christmas jumper free pattern. I'm just so excited. Thank you for being here, thank you for clicking on this video, and thank you for all the support that I've received so far. I really hope you love this design as much as I do. I'm going to go over everything you need to know before we get started, then we're going to do a gauge swatch together, and then we'll get started on the pattern. So you do need to know how to crochet first things first to do this pattern. Now if you're a beginner and you've made a few things, I feel like you might be able to do this. It might be a stretch. If you really want to give it a go, I feel like it's really actually not that hard. Like the actual skill level, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but you can always watch the video, see what you think, and then after that you can be like, okay, I feel like I could do that, or, you know, not. So I'm going to say it's for advanced beginners, but honestly, like, even if you've never made a jumper before, don't be intimidated because we've got all the steps. I am actually going to take this off because I can't concentrate because I'm literally sweating. You're going to need size 3/DK weight yarn. I used Wendy's Supreme DK. You can use another yarn if you want to, just make sure that you get the gauge correct. So if you look up the tension on Wendy's Supreme DK, try and get one that has the same tension. And then you're going to need that in 3 different colours. So you've got your main colour, then the reindeer like head colour, and then the antler/eye colour. You don't have to use dark brown for that. You can use black for the antlers if that's what you have. You can mix it up. You can do rainbow reindeer if you want to. It's completely up to you. With the 3 different colours, try to use the same yarn. So for example, I used Wendy's Supreme DK in all 3 colours because then I just knew that the work was going to be consistent and the finished result was going to be like the best it could possibly be. If you can't get it the same, then again, look at that tension swatch on the label of the yarn and make sure that they match up, because otherwise the reindeer is not going to sit right if the main colour yarn is different to the reindeer colour yarn. And then you'll also need a pom-pom. I will leave the handle of the Etsy shop where I got this pom-pom from. I'll also leave it linked in the description if you'd like to grab yourselves one. This is the colour bright red in the size small, I believe. So either get yourself that, or you can make a pom-pom out of yarn. You would obviously need some red yarn for that. Or if you don't like the pom-pom look, you can always duplicate stitch afterwards if you prefer. I'll leave a list of all the other things you're going to need on the screen as well. Time to get into the sizing info. So just so you know, there is a PDF version of this pattern that you can download on my website. It's not free, but a lot of work went into it. It's all colour coordinated for like the sizes. The different sizes are different colours. There's photos, there's a chart. So like the Rudolph, there is a chart for that. There's a schematic, a sizing table, and there is more sizing info in the pattern. So if you want that extra info, for example, how long is a size small? How wide is a size XL? That is in the pattern. And you know, I get a lot of questions about this, but at the end of the day, I'm giving this away as a free resource. So if you do want that extra information, you will have to purchase the pattern, and I really hope you can understand that. If you choose your size and follow this pattern as you should and your gauge is correct, you don't need the PDF pattern, but it's just if you want that extra info, or if you prefer that, it's there if you'd like it. So I've added in an extra size compared to normal just because where it's really oversized, I've just wanted it so that every size can size down if they want to. So if you're an extra small, you can size down to 2XS. It is very oversized, okay? So I don't want loads of messages being like, oh my god, it's massive. It is supposed to be massive. I'm a 33-inch bust. I made the size small. It has like up to 18 inches of positive ease, guys. That is a lot of positive ease. So if you don't like it oversized and you don't want it to be huge, size down. Sorry, I don't mean that to come across aggressive. It's just with my oversized slouchy sweater tutorial, I've just had so many messages of people being like, it's huge. Well, it's called the oversized slouchy sweater, so. But yeah, I didn't want it that extra small can't size down, so I've added in the 2XS option as well. I will leave that size and info on the screen now for you. So again, you don't need to size up to get the oversized look. I made the size small. I'm a 33-inch bust. Like I said, there's more size and info in the PDF if you'd like it. That brings me on to yarn yardages. So the Rudolph is the same for every size. So the actual like motif, if that's what you'd call it, like the actual colour work is the same, but then the main colour of the jumper just gets bigger as we go. Here's how much you need of the 2 contrasting colours, so like the beige and the dark brown or black. That's the same for every size. This is how much yarn you're going to need for the main colour, whichever colour you decide to do that. So for mine, that would be the cream colour. together, that's how much you're going to need depending on the size that you're going to make. Now that leads me on to the gauge info. We are going to do a gauge swatch together, but if you don't get your gauge swatch correct, your jumper will not turn out the predicted measurements. So it can save you a hell of a lot of time if you just take 10 minutes beforehand to sort out your gauge swatch, then you know you're good to go. We're going to do that together in just a minute. Again, thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you do enjoy it, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, comment. You know, I worked so hard on this pattern and I just would really appreciate the support so much. It really helps push my channel out there so that we can get these free resources to more people. Do subscribe as well if you want to stick around for more tutorials from me. I've got lots coming up in the works. Also, don't forget to tag me on socials with your works in progress, your finished items. It absolutely makes my day seeing your stuff, and I can share it on my Instagram story as well. If you're private, I don't think I can see your work if you tag me in it, but you can always send me a DM with a little photo, and I just absolutely love looking at it. I'm going to leave some abbreviations on the screen as well, just so that I don't have to keep typing out all the long words like half double crochet in the back loop only. Without any more babbling, let's get crafting.
So here's a little look at the yarn that I used. If you just want to have a look at the label, feel free to pause the video if you want to have a little look. I've got my 5mm crochet hook and we're going to do a gauge swatch together. And sorry about the state of my hook, but you know what it's like. It's my old trusty, so I'm not getting a new one. We're going to start off with a slip knot. So to start off our swatch, we're going to chain 19. Once you've got your 19 chains, we're going to do a half double crochet in the third chain from the hook. So we've got 1 chain, 2 chains and 3 chains. We're going into that third one from the hook. So we've got 1, 2 and 3. So yarn over, insert your hook into that third chain from the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And there you've got actually 2 half double crochet stitches, because the 2 chains that we skipped over count as your first half double crochet stitch, and then you've got your actual half double crochet stitch that you did. Then we're going to half double crochet in each chain across, and then when you get to the end of this row you should have 18 stitches, which will include those 2 chains that we skipped over right at the start. So your work should then look something like this. Again, you should have 18 stitches all the way across the row. So that was row 1. We're now going to do row 2. So if you chain 2 and turn your work, we're going to go into the next stitch. So in my patterns, the beginning chain 2 counts as the first stitch. So we're going into this next stitch here. The stitch that is just above my right thumb is the stitch that is directly under the beginning chain 2. So the reason I don't go in there is because our chain 2 counts as that first stitch. However, if you do it in a different way, then you can do that. This is just the way that I do it and that makes sense to me. And then that beginning chain 2 is going to count as your first stitch in all of the rows throughout the whole pattern. And it is already in all the info that I've given you so far, but I know some of you will have missed it, so we are using US crochet terms. So I've just gone into that next stitch that I was talking about with a half double crochet stitch, and you can see there it's the stitch next to the beginning chain 2. We're then going to work across the rest of the row with half double crochet stitches. When you get to the end of row 2, it's easy to actually accidentally miss off a stitch. So we actually have 2 stitches left here. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So I've just gone into the second from last stitch. Some of us might feel like the row is finished, but it's not. So we also need to go into this little loop here, which is the chain 2 that we skipped over right when we did our beginning chain. So there we have a complete row, and if you are unsure, just make sure you have a total of 18 stitches across, and that includes the beginning chain 2. So your beginning chain 2 counts as a stitch. So again, we've got our beginning chain 2. We're not going into the one directly underneath it, we're going into the one next to it. Half double crochet into that next stitch, and then half double crochet in every stitch across. Then all you'll do is repeat row 2 until you have a total of 11 rows. So row 2 is just to chain 2, turn, half double crochet in every stitch across, and you're just going to repeat that. And sorry about the focus that keeps changing. It actually does sort itself out when I move the candle in a minute. Make sure you always have 18 stitches on the row, including the beginning chain 2. So once you've done your 11 rows, this is what your work should be looking like. So it should measure 4 by 4 inches. So you can see when I measure mine across, 18 stitches is exactly 4 inches. And it's the same when I measure the height as well. Now, this is actually going to stretch. So as we start to make the jumper, this gauge swatch or this tension will actually stretch more to like 16 stitches and maybe 10 rows. But if this is your starting point, then you'll be fine. If your gauge swatch has turned out too big, you need to go down half a hook size or a whole hook size and try again. And alternatively, if your gauge swatch is too small, then go up a half or a whole hook size, try again and see how you get on. But if your gauge swatch is incorrect, then the size of your jumper will also turn out incorrect. So it's really worth taking the time to get this right before you start the whole project. Starting again with a slip knot, we're going to do the front panel and we're starting off with the ribbon because it's worked bottom up. So for the ribbon, all sizes need to chain 15. I'm so sorry about the focus. I swear it does get better than this. It's literally just because of the candle. I was just trying to make it look cute and it did not serve me. I'm sorry. So I've changed my 15. Again, we're going to, just the same as we did for the gauge swatch, we're going into that third chain from the hook with a half double crochet, and then we're going to work in each chain across. Again, we got 2 there because we got the beginning chain 2 or the chain 2 that we skipped over, the 2 chains, and then the first actual half double crochet that we did, just the same as the gauge swatch. So if you did do the swatch, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then we're going to do a half double crochet in every chain across. Your work should then be looking like this. Going on to row 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn the work. Again, we're going into that next stitch, but we're going to go into the back loop only. So on the top of the little V there, you can see I'm just going into the back loop with a half double crochet, and we're going to repeat that across the row. So just always only going into one loop, and that's the loop that's on the back of the stitch, and that is going to create the ribbon effect and give us that nice texture. So if you repeat that across the row, again, same as the gauge swatch, when you get to the end of row 2, just make sure you do actually go into that very last stitch, which is those 2 chains that we skipped over right at the beginning when we started this little bit again with our beginning chain. So you should have 14 stitches on the row, including your beginning chain 2. So if you're ever unsure, just count your stitches and then you'll know. Again, chain 2 and turn, going into that next stitch into the back loop only, and then in each stitch across, and you're just going to repeat that. So chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the back loop only across the row, maintain 14 stitches on every row, no more no less. And you want to keep repeating that until your total work, so the length of your ribbing, measures however many inches it says on the screen for your size. And I'm just showing you there, you'll start to see your nice textured ribbon kind of coming into effect. Once you've got to the right measurement, you can come back. So your work should be looking something like this, and when you measure it, just make sure that it's not being stretched. So mine measures 24 inches because I'm making the size small. And also, sorry for the change again in the background, I am at Center Parks in this clip, so I was really making do. I was with my in-laws, and this is the best I could do in the situation. We're going to start working into the ends of these rows, and then we'll start going back and forth and kind of work our way up for the front panel. So we're going to spread out stitches along this edge here. So start off by doing a chain 2. Again, that chain 2 counts as our first stitch. So we're going to go in around about where the next stitch would normally be, because obviously we're going into the ends of the rows, so they're not like traditional stitches. So I've just kind of gone across into where that would normally sit. And then we are just going to kind of keep working across, and I'll leave on the screen how many stitches you need to do across this ribbing section. The goal is to spread them out as evenly as you can, so try and count as you go, because then when you get to like the halfway point, you'll kind of know whether you're on track or not. that means your total stitch count is going to be one more than the number that it says on the screen, because you've got your chain 2, which is your first stitch, and then it says evenly spread out this many crochet stitches or half double crochet stitches across. So then those stitches plus the beginning chain 2 equal one more than the amount of stitches it says on the screen. And then this is what your work should start to look like. It should be nice and neat and evenly spread out, and just complete that across the row. This is what my work looks like once I've got my stitches all the way across. So I've got 103, which includes my beginning chain 2 because I'm doing the size small. And then once you have got the right amount of stitches, we're going on to row 2 of the main body section. So we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. We're going to go into the next stitch with a half double crochet, and then in each stitch across until you finish the row. And then what we're going to do after that is you're just going to repeat this row 2 until your work measures however many inches it says on the screen for your size. So you'll just chain 2, turn, half double crochet in every stitch across, and again keeping that stitch count the same. I'll also put the stitch count on the screen for you as well, just in case you forget or anything, but just keep repeating that until your total work, including the ribbon, measures however many inches it says for your size. If you do want to make your total jumper shorter or longer in length, then now would be the time to make that change. So you can either add in an inch here, take away an inch here, or more or less than that. Obviously only do it if you feel confident, because you'll have to account for it on the back panel as well. There's a little bit more info in the PDF pattern. I wish I had the time to go over it properly with you, but if you did want to do that, then now is the time. Your work should be looking something like this once you've done all of that. Now we're going to start the colour work. So I'm going to be using the intarsia method, which don't be intimidated by that because it's actually really easy, and I'm going to show you it step by step. You're going to start off by doing a chain 2 and turn, and we're going to half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen. But what I wanted to say is you can do the colour work with floaters in the back if you want. However, that's going to use up a considerably more amount of yarn. So basically with intarsia knitting, you've got your working yarn that you've been using so far, and that is going to stay on this side of my work. And then we've got the middle colour that we're going to be using, so the beige colour. And then we've also got another ball of the main colour yarn, and that's going to go over the other side of the work. Obviously, we're going to have the beige in the middle. So then when we work on this side of the beige block of colour, we're going to use that ball of yarn. And when we work on this side, we're going to use that ball of yarn. Then in the middle, obviously, you've got your beige. I'm now going to show you how to change colours. So what you want to do is when you've done those half double crochet stitches across, before you finish your last stitch that you need to do, you're going to actually drop the main colour yarn, and then you're going to get your new colour yarn, and you're just going to loop it over around your hook and then pull your hook through those 3 loops that are on your hook. And obviously, because this is our first colour change, we actually need to join the yarns together. So I'm just going to tie the tail of my new colour to the cream colour of my working yarn. I'm pulling the yarn tight, but not really tight, because I don't want it to be, I don't want it to mess with the tension, but I also don't want it to be loose. So I'm just going to fasten that into place, and now we're ready to start working with our new colour. So feel free to rewatch that again if you need to, but you basically need to remember that on the last stitch you're doing before you change colours, you actually need to set yourself up to change colours on that very last stitch by finishing the stitch in the new colour, and that way it just looks more seamless. You want to make sure that that little tail is in the back, and also your main colour yarn is in the back as well, and then we're going to start using our beige colour. And all sizes need to do 31 half double crochet stitches in the beige colour, and this is going to start the bottom of the reindeer. So again, when switching back to the main colour yarn, the same rule applies. So on my 31st stitch in beige, which is the last one, I'm not going to finish the stitch in the beige, I'm going to finish the stitch in my main colour yarn. But remember, we're not carrying this strand of yarn over. We're going to start a new strand, which is the other ball of the main colour yarn that we had on the other side of our work when we were kind of setting up for it. So I'm now attaching that new ball of yarn, and I'm just going to do it in the exact same way that I attached the beige. So I'm just going to loop the tail around my hook and I'm going to pull it through to finish the stitch. You can see there it's looking a little bit loose, so I'm just going to pull the beige strand a little bit, pull the cream strand a little bit, and then I'm going to tie the little tail of the cream strand and the working strand of the beige yarn, and I'm just going to tie them together again, not going too tight because you don't want to alter the tension or anything. So fasten that into place. That will then look like this, and you'll be ready to go with your main colour yarn again. And then what your balls of yarn should look like is you've got this cream yarn attached here for that side of your work. You've got the middle colour, which is the beige, and that should be attached there. And then you've just attached your next main colour ball of yarn. So we've got 3 different strands of yarn, 3 separate balls of yarn. And then all we're going to do is with that new main colour yarn that we've just attached, we're going to half double crochet in every stitch across the end of the row. Hopefully you can see the intarsia crochet method isn't actually as intimidating as what you first thought. So once you finish that row, that'll be row 1 of the colour work. We're going to start again from row 1. So that was row 1. I'm now just going to make sure that my yarn isn't twisted, and I just like to kind of use the beige yarn to kind of get untangled. You'll find your own method to the madness as you go along, but if you kind of sort out the tangles as you go, it does make life easier. Now for row 2 of the colour work, we're going to chain 2 and turn. We're going to work in the main colour yarn, half double crochet in each stitch until you get to 2 stitches before the beige stitches. So the reason I've told you to stop when you've got 2 main colour stitches left is because we need to change colour 1 stitch before the beige section, but I just wanted to remind you that you need to do it on the stitch before. So you can see I've got 2 main colour stitches left. I'm now going to do my last main colour stitch, and then before I complete that stitch I'm going to switch over to my beige coloured yarn. So I've literally just pulled the beige colour yarn through those 3 loops to complete the stitch, and now I'm ready to crochet with my beige yarn. Now you see this strand of main colour yarn in my left hand. I'm about to put this at the back, but that means it's actually on the front because we've turned our work. So you need to keep that main colour yarn in the front this time because the front is actually the back of your work. So when you see me put mine at the back, don't do that because you'll either have to undo your work to like retrieve the strand of yarn when you need it, or you'll have to cut the yarn. So you can see I just put it behind. Don't do that, bring it in front, and then you're going to half double crochet into the last main colour stitch that you've got there. And then we're going to half double crochet across the whole beige section. So you can see I've got 1 beige stitch left, so I'm going to go into that, and then we are increasing the beige colour, so we're going to go 1 stitch into the main colour section with our beige yarn. But remember, don't finish that stitch because now we're going to switch over to the main colour yarn. So you've still got 3 loops on your hook. You're going to pull that main colour yarn through using the yarn that is obviously near the stitch that you're creating, so you're using the correct ball of yarn for that main colour. Again, make sure you pull any strands of yarn into the front of your work now because it's actually the back, and then we're going to go into the next available stitch in our main colour yarn, and we're just going to work across to the end of the row. And also when you're switching colours, you do kind of want to pull both strands a little bit tight so that they're not loose, but obviously not too tight that they're too tight. But you can play around with it, but once you kind of pull that stitch, it does tend to stay where it is. So then this is what your work should be looking like once you've completed row 2 of the colour work. And so for row 3, we're going to chain 2, we're going to turn our work. And this is going to be a repeat of row 2. So we're going to half double crochet in each stitch across in the main colour until we get to 2 stitches before the beige section so that we can change to the beige colour. So I've got 2 main colour stitches left before the beige section. So in the next stitch I'm going to change over to the beige colour yarn. Make sure any strands of yarn are going to be in the back of your work. So obviously we're on the front at the minute, so you want to push it to the back, pull in those strands of yarn tightly, but not too tight. And then you've got one main colour stitch left, so go into that with the beige. So we're increasing by one stitch out to the side with the beige section on either side for every row. So then if you work across in the beige colour yarn, so again I've got one beige stitch left, so I'm going to go into that one as normal, and then we're going to increase the beige colour by one stitch out to the side into the main colour, but we need to obviously switch back to our main colour yarn. So again, we've increased the beige section out to the side by one on each side for each row. You want to repeat this until you've got a total of 7 rows for the colour work. So just repeating the last 2 rows that we've done, making sure to switch your colour one stitch before you need to, and then keeping your strands of yarn in the back of the work, whichever side that happens to be. So once you've done that, your work should be looking something like this. So you should have gradual sort of diagonal line of the beige colour going out to the side on each side of your work. So now we're going to go on to row 8 of the colour work. Chain 2 and turn your work. Half double crochet in each stitch across until you get to the beige section. So making sure that you switch your colour to the beige yarn one stitch before you get to the beige section. So I'm just going to do my last main colour stitch in the last main colour stitch that is available. And then I'm going to switch the colour of my yarns. So now the next available stitch we're going into is the first beige stitch from the previous row. So we're no longer increasing that beige colour out to the side. We're now just going to do beige stitches in all the previous beige stitches. So then when you get to the other side of the beige section, going into the last beige stitch and then switching colours over to the main colour yarn. And then you're just going to work across with half double crochets in the main colour yarn to the end of the row. And you're going to repeat this row. So this is row 8, and you're going to repeat row 8 until you have a total of 22 rows for the colour work. So we're not increasing the colours out to the side at all. We're just going to do beige stitches in every previous beige stitch on the row before. And so the colour work is going to go straight upwards. Always remember to change colour one stitch before you actually need to, and keep your strands of yarn all over the same side, because that's going to be the inside of your work. And that is the last time I'm going to remind you guys about those 2 things, because I'm going to assume that you will remember. So once you've got those 22 rows, your work should be looking something like this. For row 23, chain 2 and turn your work, and then you're going to work in your main colour yarn until you get to the beige section, just like you've been doing up to this point. So I've switched colours and I'm ready to go. Now what you need to do is work in your beige coloured yarn for 10 stitches, and then we are going to introduce our dark brown or black yarn, which I'll be referring to as dark brown. So do your 10 stitches, but on the 10th you want to switch over to that dark brown colour. So I've got my 10 stitches, which I'm just finishing the 10th by adding in the dark brown colour, and I'm just going to fasten that into place. Now we're going to do 4 stitches in the dark brown colour. So I'm going to do this part with you just because it's going to be easier. So there's 3, and then here's the 4th. Obviously I've just completed the stitch, but we don't want to do that because we're going to switch colours again. So instead of completing that 4th stitch, make sure you switch back to your beige colour. Now for the eyes, I am just carrying the yarn across, because otherwise I just feel like it will get too complicated. So when you're carrying the yarn across, just make sure that you've left enough yarn in the back as a floater so that you don't screw up the tension. You know, you want this strand of yarn to kind of be like tight but not very tight, and also not very loose. You can then just pull those strands tight, push that dark brown yarn into the back, and then we're ready to go again with our beige colour. We've got 15 stitches with the beige colour, so make sure you switch back to the dark brown on the 15th stitch, and again you're going to be carrying that brown yarn, the dark brown yarn, from the first eye. So just make sure that the yarn in the back, the floater, isn't going to be too tight. And if you don't feel comfortable carrying the yarn and having the floaters in the back, you don't have to do this. You can add another ball of dark brown if you want. I just felt like that's just overwhelmed City. Like I did not want to have more balls of yarn attached to my work than what was already currently there. But you can just see the floater in the back there. It's just going across. But you do have to be careful because it can kind of mess up your tension if it's too loose or too tight. So just make sure it's kind of just sitting there comfortably. And then we're going to do another 4 stitches with this dark brown yarn. On the 4th one, we're going to switch back to the beige colour. And then with that beige colour, you just want to crochet the rest of the beige stitches. So just like we've been doing up to this point, we're not increasing the beige colour out to the side or anything like that. On the last beige stitch, switch to your main colour yarn, and then you're just going to half double crochet to the end of the row in your main colour yarn. And then the next row, so row 24, is going to be the exact same as this row that I'm currently on, which is row 23. So do the exact same again with the brown stitches. So the brown stitches are going to stay brown, if that makes sense, and just do the exact same colour changes that you did for this row. And just so you know as well, this is what my work looks like from the back. So if yours looks something like this, then you're completely on the right track. After row 24, your work should be looking something like this. Once you've done row 24, you can go into row 25. So you want to chain 2 and turn, and then half double crochet in your main colour yarn until you get to the beige section. Switch over to your beige coloured yarn. We're going to work in the beige coloured yarn until we've done 1 stitch into the dark brown section, which I'm about to show you. So now I've just got to the dark brown section. I'm going to do 1 more stitch with the beige coloured yarn. And then before I finish that stitch, I'm just going to switch over to my dark brown. Then we're going to do 2 dark brown stitches. Switch to your beige coloured yarn on that second dark brown stitch. We're then going to keep working across in the beige colour, and then we're going to do the same for the other eye. So work in the beige colour until you get to 1 stitch into the brown colour. So go 1 stitch into the dark brown, switch colours, and then we're going to do 2 dark brown stitches. I'm just checking that all my floaters are all okay in the back there. 2 dark brown stitches, switching back to beige on the second dark brown stitch, switching back to the beige colour, and then before you move on, you can actually cut the dark brown yarn and then just fasten it into place. So I'm tying that dark brown tail with the working beige yarn that I've got, and then I'm going to work in the beige yarn until I get to the end of the beige section. Once I'm at the end of the beige section, I've switched to main colour, and then I'm going to half double crochet in the main colour to the end of the row. Your work should look something like this. Once you've done that, this is what it looks like on the back. Okay, row 26 of the colour work, we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. We're going to work in the main colour yarn until we get to the beige section. We're then going to work the beige colour all the way across the beige section. So no increases or decreases with the colours, and we're not using dark brown yarn. And then when you get to the other side of the beige section, switch back to main colour and crochet across in the main colour to the end of the row. So your work should be looking something like this. We've done 1 row above the eyes, and then we're going to go on to row 27. Start by doing a chain 2 and turn, and then work across in half double crochets in the main colour yarn until you get to the beige section. Now we're going to start decreasing the beige section. So I've got 1 more main colour stitch, which I'm going to go into as normal. And now I'm going to do 2 more main colour stitches going into that beige section. So you can see I've just done 2 main colour stitches on the previous 2 beige stitches that are on the edge of that beige section. I'm going to switch over to my beige coloured yarn, and then I'm going to half double crochet across in the beige coloured yarn. I have 3 beige stitches left, so in the next one I'm just going to finish that stitch by switching colours. So I now have 2 beige stitches left, and I'm going to do main colour stitches into those 2 beige stitches, and then continue with the main colour to the end of the row. So you can see we're starting to decrease the beige section, and this is going to take us with that sort of diagonal line going inwards to start the ears. So that was row 27. You need to repeat row 27 2 more times. So I'll show you what your work should look like once you've done that, but you're going to go across 2 more times doing the exact same thing, bringing in that beige section in by 2 stitches on either side for each row. So once you've done that, you should have done 29 rows for the colour work so far. Your work should be looking something like this. And then what we're going to do is start increasing the beige section out to the side by 2 so that we can start doing the diagonal line going outwards for the actual ears. So row 30, chain 2 and turn your work. Work in the main colour yarn until you get a few stitches before the beige section. So I've got 2 main colour stitches left and I've already switched to my beige colour. It's hard to see because I've got that sort of little strand of beige going up, but you can see there I've got 1 and 2. So that's 2 beige stitches I've just done on the outer edge of the main colour. And then I'm going to work across with the beige colour across the beige stitches. How many times can I say beige? And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So when you get to the other side, I'm going to do 2 stitches into the main colour section. So I'll do that one and that one in the beige colour, then switch to main colour and half double crochet to the end of the row. Once you've done that, your work should be looking something like this. So you can see we're starting to increase back out to the side. Once you've done that, you then need to do it one more time. So increase the beige section by 2 stitches out to the side on either side, and your work should be looking something like this. We're going to continue increasing out to the side in the same way for the ears, but we also need to add in the start of the antlers as well. So that's what we're going to do next. This is going to be row 32 of the colour work, chain 2 and turn your work, and then work in the main colour until you get 2 stitches before the beige section, increase by 2 stitches out to the side with the beige colour. So you can see I've worked my way across there. I've got my 2 main colour stitches left, so I'm just going to do my 2 beige stitches in there. And then we're going to do 12 beige colour half double crochet stitches, and that includes the 2 that we've already just done. So a total of 12 beige stitches until we need to switch to our dark brown. So I'm not going to show you how to change colour because I feel like you should be able to do that by now, but you can see I've got 12 beige stitches and then I've just attached my dark brown. We need to do 2 dark brown stitches and then you're going to switch back to beige. Do 15 beige stitches, and then once you've done those 15, we'll switch back again to the brown and we're going to carry the brown yarn over. Then you've got another 2 dark brown stitches, and once you've done those 2 dark brown stitches, you'll switch back to the beige colour, and then you're going to work across in half double crochet stitches, and you're going to increase the beige section out to the side by 2 as well. And then obviously work in the main colour yarn until the end of the row. Then after that, we'll actually be repeating this row, which is row 32, 4 more times. So you'll have a total of 5 rows that include the antlers. So for the next 4 rows, keep increasing the beige section out to the side by 2 stitches like we have been doing for the last few rows. And at the same time, every time you get to those brown stitches in the groups of 2, just do the brown stitches in the same place as you did on the previous row. You should always have 2 brown stitches together, and then you always want to have 15 beige stitches in between the 2 dark brown sections. So once you've repeated row 32 4 times, you should have 36 rows in total for the colour work, and it should be looking like this. And this is what mine looks like from the back. For row 37, you're going to chain 2 and turn your work. We're going to work in the main colour all the way until we get to the dark brown stitches. So you can actually at this point cut the beige yarn and fasten it into place. So you can see I've worked my way across in the main colour yarn, and I've got all the way to the dark brown stitches. I'm going to continue with my 2 dark brown stitches. Then we're going to switch back to the main colour, and we're going to work in the main colour yarn again until we get to the next 2 dark brown stitches. When you get to those dark brown stitches, you're going to do the 2 dark brown stitches in the same place that you did on the previous row, and after that just work along in the main colour yarn until the end of the row. You'll need to do that for one more row as well. So this is row 37. Repeat row 37 once more. So then you'll have 38 colourwork rows in total, and your work should be looking like this. Going on to row 39 of the colourwork, chain 2 and turn your work. You're going to work in the main colour yarn until you get to 4 stitches before the dark brown stitches. So I've got 4 main colour stitches left before those 2 dark brown stitches, and I'm all ready to go in my dark brown colour. So what we're going to do now is 8 half double crochet stitches in the dark brown colour. Switch back to the main colour yarn on the 8th stitch, and I'm just carrying the main colour yarn over. In fact, I actually ended up cutting one of my main colour strands off and just having 2 balls of yarn attached to my work at this point, because I just found it was easier and I wasn't actually using one of the balls of yarn. So that bit's up to you, but I'm just going to carry it across because we're not having to carry it too far. We're then going to do 11 stitches in the main colour yarn, and you can switch back to that dark brown yarn on the 11th stitch. We're going to do 8 more dark brown stitches, and you can see there's only 2 main colour stitches left before we get to the dark brown section, and that's because the antlers actually mirror each other. So once we get going, I'll be showing you the instructions for one antler, and then you just repeat it in the opposite direction for the second antler, if that makes sense. So they're mirrored and they are symmetrical. Once you've done your 8 dark brown stitches, you can switch back to the main colour yarn and then half double crochet in the main colour yarn to the end of the row. And then for the next row, which is going to be row 40, you want to repeat the same thing again. So basically do dark brown stitches on the previous dark brown stitches and do main colour stitches on the previous main colour stitches. So you're just mimicking the row that you've just done. This is what your work should look like after you've done row 40 of the colour work. Now going on to row 41 of the colour work, chain 2 and turn your work. We're going to work in the main colour yarn, and you want to switch to the dark brown colour when you get to 1 stitch before the dark brown section. Now something that is important to note is that from now on the dark brown yarn is only ever used with 2 stitches at a time. So you're never going to do more than 2 stitches in one go with the brown yarn. So I have 1 stitch of main colour left. I'm going to do my 2 dark brown stitches. I'm then going to switch to main colour, and I'm going to do main colour for 3 stitches. Switch back to brown and do your 2 dark brown stitches. Switch back to the main colour for just 1 stitch, and then we're going to do the last 2 dark brown stitches of this antler. Switch back to the main colour and you're going to do 9 main colour stitches, and then we're going to work the antler the same again but in reverse order. So I'll start you off. So I've done my 9 main colour stitches, and to make it easier I'm just going to look at my previous antler to know what I need to do next. So I'm going to do my 2 dark brown stitches. So one should be in the stitch before you get to the dark brown section, and then the next one should be on the first stitch of the dark brown section. Switch to your main colour yarn, and then we've got 1 main colour stitch. Switch to brown, and of course it's 2 brown stitches because we only ever do 2 brown stitches at a time. And you can see I'm working this antler in reverse order from this one. So these are the 2 brown stitches that are there. We've then got 3 main colour stitches followed by the last 2 dark brown colour stitches. Work along in that fashion until you've completed the second antler, and then you'll work across in main colour yarn to the end of the row. Your work should be looking something like this, and the stitches should be symmetrical, but the way that the crochet stitches sit, they will look kind of like sisters and not twins. So if yours are giving that kind of energy, don't worry, because that's just because of like the way crochet stitches sit. They're not as straight as knit stitches. For row 42, I've chained 2, I've turned, and I've half double crocheted across in the main colour. I've switched to dark brown, but I've still got one more main colour stitch left before I actually get to that dark brown section. It's just a little bit hard to see because I've got floaters there. But I'm going to go into that main colour stitch with my dark brown colour, and I'm going to do my 2 dark brown stitches. Switch back to main colour, and this time we're going to do 4 main colour stitches. Switch back to dark brown and do your 2 dark brown stitches. Then you've got 1 main colour stitch, followed by your last 2 dark brown stitches for this antler. And then I'm going to take you across to the next antler, and you can work the stitches again in reverse order. So in between the antlers, you need to do 9 main colour stitches. On the 9th stitch, switch to your dark brown yarn. You got your first 2 dark brown stitches. Then it's 1 main colour stitch, because when you look back there's 1 main colour stitch. And then we're going to keep working across these stitches in reverse order, so the antlers are going to be symmetrical. And once you've done the second antler, you can work across the rest of the row in the main colour yarn. Now we're on row 43, so I chained 2 and I turned my work. I worked in the main colour yarn right up to where the brown section starts. So I'm doing my first 2 brown stitches in the same place as what they were in the previous row. We've then got 3 main colour stitches, followed by your next 2 dark brown stitches. Then it's 2 half double crochet stitches in the main colour yarn. Then do your last 2 dark brown stitches for this antler. Switch back to main colour, and you're going to do another 9 main colour stitches across to the next antler. After you've done those 9 main colour stitches, you're going to start the next antler. So you've got your first 2 dark brown stitches, and then work that antler the same as you did the previous one, but just in reverse order. Then you can half double crochet in the main colour to the end of the row. So for row 44, chain 2 and turn and half double crochet across in the main colour until you've gone 1 stitch into that first brown section. So I'm just doing my last main colour stitch there, and it's going into that first dark brown stitch. I'm going to switch colours. You're going to do your first 2 dark brown stitches, then you've got 1 main colour stitch, followed by 2 dark brown stitches. Then it's 4 main colour stitches after that. Then you've got your last 2 dark brown stitches. Switch to the main colour to go in between the antlers. And this time in between the antlers, you've got 7 stitches. So 7 stitches in the main colour. And once you've got those 7 main colour stitches, you can work in reverse order using the first antler that you did to help you pave the way. And then after you've done that second antler, you can just half double crochet across to the end of the row in the main colour. So after row 44, this is what my antlers are looking like. We're going to go on to row 45. So you want to chain 2 and turn your work, and then half double crochet along until you get to 1 stitch before your next dark brown stitches, and do your 2 dark brown half double crochets. You've then got 1 stitch in the main colour. Then it's your next 2 dark brown stitches, followed by 5 stitches in the main colour yarn. Then you've got your last 2 dark brown stitches. In between the antlers, we've got 7 stitches in the main colour yarn. Then you've got your first 2 dark brown stitches for the second antler. Do the second antler the same but in reverse order. And then once you've done that, you can half double crochet in the main colour yarn until the end of the row. This is row 46 of the colour work. We are homing on in now, so I'm gonna stop with my main colour yarn 1 stitch before I get to the brown section, and then I'm gonna half double crochet my 2 brown stitches. So one is in the main colour, one is in the dark brown colour, and obviously you will have half double crocheted in the main colour yarn up until that point with your chain 2 and turn at the start of the row. Then I switch to the main colour for 1 stitch. We have our 2 next dark brown stitches, switch back over to the main colour, and then you've got 6 main colour stitches. And once you've done those 6, switch to your dark brown yarn, do your last 2 dark brown stitches. In between the antlers this time, you've got another 7 stitches. And then you can start to work that first antler once again in reverse order, and then after that, half double crochet in the main colour yarn to the end of the row. I just wanted to show you roughly what your antlers should be looking like. So like I said, they're going to be sisters, not twins. If you do make like one little mistake, you know, one stitch is one over more than it should be or something like that, don't stress too much, because I have actually made a mistake in mine. I know you won't be able to notice it, so I'm not going to show you where it is, but don't stress about it, because as long as they look like antlers, then it doesn't matter too much. Row 47, so we're going to half double crochet across in the main colour yarn until we get 1 stitch before our first dark brown section. We're then going to do our first 2 dark brown stitches. Then it's going to be 2 main colour stitches, followed by 2 more brown stitches. Then we've got 5 main colour stitches. Then it's your last 2 dark brown stitches for this antler. Then you've got 9 main colour stitches in between the 2 antlers, and then once again work that antler once again in reverse order, and then half double crochet across the rest of the row in the main colour. Your work should be looking something like this. We've now got row 48, so chain 2, turn your work and half double crochet across in the main colour yarn. You want to stop before you get 1 stitch away from the first dark brown stitch. So I've got 1 main colour stitch left, and I'm going to go in there with my 2 dark brown stitches. We've then got 2 stitches in the main colour yarn. Then you're going to go and do your 2 dark brown stitches again. You've then got 5 main colour stitches, followed by your last 2 dark brown stitches for this antler. In between the 2 antlers, you've now got 11 stitches, so do 11 stitches in the main colour yarn, and then work that first antler again in reverse order, and then half double crochet to the end of the row in the main colour yarn. Your work should be looking like this. We've got 1 more colour work row to do. So again, chain 2, turn, work along in half double crochets in the main colour yarn. When you get to the first dark brown section, you're just going to keep going in the main colour until you get to the 3rd dark brown section. So I'm just going to keep going with my main colour yarn over the first double dark brown bit, then over the second dark brown bit, all the way across until I'm 1 stitch before the 3rd dark brown bit. So I'm 1 stitch before my 3rd dark brown section. I'm going to do 2 dark brown stitches in there, switch back over to the main colour yarn. You've then got 13 half double crochet stitches in that main colour yarn until you've got your next dark brown bit. So then once you've done those 13 main colour stitches in the middle, you should be 1 stitch into the next dark brown section. You're going to switch to the dark brown colour, do your last 2 dark brown stitches, Then you can actually cut that dark brown yarn and fasten it into place, and then work across the rest of the row in half double crochet in the main color. So just skipping over the rest of the dark brown sections with your main color and work all the way to the end. Your work should be looking like this, and that is the lengthiest and hardest part of the tutorial done. After you've completed the colour work, you just need to do 2 normal rows of half double crochet with the main colour yarn. So just chain 2, turn, half double crochet in every stitch across. Do that twice after you've completed the colour work, and then we're going to go on to the shoulder shaping. So this is going to be starting again from row 1, chain 2 and turn, and then half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen for your size. Once you've worked across those stitches, we're going to do a decrease stitch, which is a half double crochet 2 together. So yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. Keeping those 3 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over and go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and you should have 5 loops then on your hook. You yarn over and pull through all 5 loops on the hook, and that is 1 half double crochet 2 together stitch, and you have now decreased by 1 stitch. Chain 2 and turn your work, and we're going to do row 2 of the shoulder shaping. We've got another half double crochet 2 together stitch, so same as before, yarn over, insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 5 loops on the hook. So you've just decreased by another stitch, and then you just need to half double crochet across the rest of the row. Row 3 of the shoulder shaping, chain 2 and turn your work. You're going to half double crochet across until you have 2 stitches remaining. If you're not sure whether or not you've got 2 stitches remaining, then count your stitches, because it can get a little bit confusing. But that is the chain 2 where I started row 2 of the shoulder shaping there. So I've just gone into the top of that as like my last stitch, if that makes sense. And then I've just done a half double crochet 2 together in those last 2 remaining stitches that we had at the end of row 3. Then for row 4 of the shoulder shaping, you're going to chain 2 and turn your work, and then half double crochet in each stitch across the row, and I'll leave a stitch count on the screen for you. When you get to the end of that row, you can fasten off and fasten that into place, and if you need that slowed down, feel free to change the playback speed in the settings. So here is what my first shoulder looks like. So we've done one side. I still need to cut my yarn and fasten it into place, but we're going to do the exact same now on the other side. So you want to attach your yarn to the outer edge of the front panel. So make a slip knot, and then with a slip stitch, you're going to join to the outermost stitch with a slip stitch. And then you're going to complete the instructions the exact same again. So I can leave a timestamp on the screen for you, and then just repeat the shoulder instructions the same again. So it's 4 rows of shoulder shaping, 3 decrease rows, and then 1 row with no decreases. Once you've done that, you can fasten off, and then that'll be your front panel all done. And I'm just showing you as well that that stitch there is the next stitch you want to go into once you've chained 2, because it can look a little bit confusing. So don't skip over that one. That is your first stitch. There you have your front panel all done. Time to go on to the back panel.
Hey guys, I'm just editing and I don't want this video to end up being any longer than it needs to be. So basically for the back panel, the instructions are the exact same for the front panel, but obviously you don't do the colour work. So you're going to do the ribbon the same, and then you're going to work back and forth in half double crochet rows until your work measures however many inches it says on the screen right now. Just don't do the colour work basically. I can leave a timestamp on the screen for where you need to go back to start the ribbon again. When it says crochet until your work measures 8 inches, for example, obviously ignore that and go to however many inches it says now. Enjoy that and then come back when you've completed that step.
So here you can see my work is measuring quite a lot more than what we did for the front panel. We've got no colour work, and now we're ready to go onto the shoulder shaping. Starting again from row 1, just to make things easier, we're going to chain 2, we're going to turn our work, and then we're going to half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen for your size. Once you've done that, we're going to do a decrease stitch, so we're going to half double crochet 2 together. Feel free to slow this down if you need a reminder. So that's 1 decrease stitch, and I'll leave on the screen how many stitches you should have now for this shoulder. You're then going to chain 2 and turn. We're going on to row 2 of our shoulder shaping. We're going to half double crochet 2 together. So we're going into that next stitch, and this is another decrease. So half double crochet 2 together, and then you're going to half double crochet in each stitch across the rest of the row. And again, I'll leave a stitch count on the screen for you. For row 3 of the shoulder shaping, chain 2 and turn your work, and then you're just going to half double crochet in each stitch across. Make sure you've got the right stitch count, and then once you've done that, you can fasten off and just tie your yarn into place. I like to leave a long tail as well when I cut the yarn, because then I'll use it later on for the seaming. And I'm just showing you here that you really need to make sure you go into that very last stitch. So there I've got a chain 2, which is, you know, the start of the previous row, and I need to go into the top of that chain 2 to actually complete row 3. Otherwise you're going to have the wrong amount of stitches, and then when it comes to seaming and stuff, you're going to kind of be like out of sync with everything. So just make sure you have got the right amount of stitches and then cut your yarn. So it should look a little something like this, and then what we're going to do is attach our yarn just like we did on the front panel to the outer edge of that back panel with a slip stitch, and you're going to repeat the instructions the exact same again, and you'll end up with something that looks like this. Now it's time to start the sleeves. So if you start off with a slip knot, and then you need to chain however many stitches it says on the screen for your size. We are going to half double crochet in the third chain from the hook, so the same as what we've been doing up to this point so far. And then you're just going to half double crochet in each stitch across, all the way across the chain. So here's what your work should look like after row 1. And we are working the sleeve flat, so you can imagine throughout this that the sleeve will actually look like this when we're wearing the jumper. So row 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn. This is nothing new. We're going to half double crochet in each stitch across the row. Make sure you go into the very last stitch of the row as well. Again, like I've said before, if you're not sure, do a stitch count. You should have this many stitches on the row. After row 2, you're going to repeat row 2 until you have a total of however many rows it says on the screen for your size. So you'll chain 2, turn, half double crochet in each stitch across the row. Don't alter the stitch count until you have however many rows in total it says on the screen. So obviously, depending on the size that you're making, your work should look something like this. Yours might be, you know, bigger than mine or smaller than mine, depending on the size. We're going to chain 2 and turn, and then this is going to be a decrease row. So we're going to half double crochet 2 together, and then we're going to half double crochet in each stitch across the row until we have 3 stitches left. When you just have those 3 stitches left, you're going to half double crochet 2 together, and then half double crochet in the very last stitch. And that will have decreased your stitch count by 2. So again, if you're not sure, count your stitches, make sure you've got the right amount on your row, and that is a decrease row. We're going to complete a series of these and we'll gradually taper in the sleeve to get smaller and smaller. So because it's a bit difficult with all the different sizes, basically I'm going to leave on the screen the instructions of when you need to do these decrease rows. So you'll do chain 2, turn, half double crochet in each stitch across, unless there's instructions for a decrease row. All the decrease rows are the exact same: chain 2, turn, half double crochet 2 together, half double crochet across until you have 3 stitches left, half double crochet 2 together, and then 1 half double crochet in the last stitch. Every decrease row will decrease your stitch count by 2. So decrease on the following rows for your size. And I did also use a stitch marker just to help me know whereabouts I was, because it can get a little bit confusing once you get into the depths of it. Once you have worked all of those decreases, you should have a sleeve that looks something along the lines of this. So it should be a nice gradual taper. We're going to go onto the ribbing now. So if you chain 12, and that should just be coming out from the corner of your last decrease row for the sleeve. And we're going to work back along that chain. So half double crochet in the third chain from the hook, and then in each chain across. So I have one more chain left to go into, and then once you've done that, we're going to slip stitch into the last decrease row we did for the sleeves. Now we're not going into this one because that's directly under the half double crochets we've just done. We're going to go into the next stitch, and we're going to do that with a slip stitch. So there's one slip stitch, then go into the next stitch with a slip stitch, and then into a third stitch with a slip stitch. So we've done 3 slip stitches. We're going to turn our work, make sure the loop on your hook is not too loose. We're going to skip over the 3 slip stitches that you've just created and then go into the next available half double crochet stitch. So this is the stitch that we want, but we're also going to go into the back loop only. So that's the loop that you want to go into, and we're going to do that with a half double crochet. Again, make sure the loop that's already on your hook is not too loose, and then go into that first available half double crochet stitch in the back loop only with a half double crochet, and then work your way back across those half double crochet stitches in the back loop only. And the rule of this is that you need to make sure you always have 11 half double crochet stitches. So I'm going to show you what it looks like just to make sure you get into those very last stitches at the tip of where your wrist is going to be. So there I've got my 11 half double crochet stitches. I'm going to chain 2 and turn, and I'm going to go into the next stitch in the back loop only with a half double crochet, and then I'm going to work my way down the row. I'm going to make sure I have 11 half double crochets, and that includes the beginning chain 2. So the beginning chain 2 is your first half double crochet, and then you want 10 more after that. When you get your way down the row, this is what it looks like to make sure you just get all 11 stitches. So you might think here that you're done, but you actually still have one more stitch to go into. And if you're ever unsure, just count the stitches. And if you've only got 10, that means you've got to do one more to make 11. So that little stitch goes in there. And then we're going to do 3 slip stitches in the next 3 available stitches. So that one we used in the last time we did slip stitches. We're going to go into the next available stitch with a slip stitch, 1, then into the next stitch with the second, and into the stitch after that with a third. You're going to turn your work, skip over those first 3 slip stitches that you've just done, and then go into the next stitch, which is the first available half double crochet stitch, but into the back loop only. And then work your way across the row in the back loop only with half double crochets. And again, make sure you've got 11 half double crochet stitches in that row. You're then just going to repeat this all the way across the sleeve. Please just always make sure you have those 11 stitches, because otherwise you're going to get a wonky cuff and it is really easy to miss off stitches. So once you get into a flow, you'll be fine, but it's just, yeah, I really want you to make sure that you've got them all. The ribbing is going to finish differently depending on what size you're making. So if you work your way across most of the sleeve until you've got like just a few stitches left where you could do slip stitches, and I'll explain how to finish the ribbing. So here is what my ribbing looks like. This is what the sleeve looks like. So depending on what size you're making, you'll have a different amount of stitches left on your sleeve. If you're making the size small or 2XL, yours should look the same as mine if you've got the right amount of stitches and everything, so you can just copy me. But basically, as you work your way back down this row now, you should have 2 slip stitches left to complete. You can slip stitch into those last 2 stitches and then just fasten off. For size 2XS, as you work your way down the ribbon, as I'm doing now, you should have 1 stitch left to slip stitch into rather than the 2 that I've got. So again, for you, you just need to slip stitch into that final stitch and you can fasten off. And for sizes extra small, large and extra large, the amount of stitches you have works perfectly. So as you work your way down that last row, you should have 3 stitches left to slip stitch into. What you're going to do is slip stitch into those last 3 stitches turn the work and do one more row of half double crochet back up the sleeve, sort of where the edge of the sleeve will be for the cuff, where your wrist will go, and then you can fasten off. I really hope that makes sense. Obviously it only works if you also have the correct amount of stitches and you've done everything right up to this point, but if you're confused, it doesn't matter too much. So you know, if you're supposed to have 2 stitches left like I had, but you only have 1, don't worry about it. Just slip stitch into the last one and fasten off. It's not really a big deal. You can see here, this is kind of what the sleeve should look like. You can see where the cuff meets the rest of the sleeve. As long as yours looks somewhat like this, then you'll be fine. So what you need to do now is do a sleeve again in the exact same way, follow the instructions again, and once you've got 2 sleeves that are the same, you can come back for the assembly section. Okay, time to go into the seaming. Now, sorry about the mess, but I'm working on very limited space. So what you want to do is grab your front panel and your back panel, and you want to face the right sides downwards. So with the back panel, it doesn't matter too much. But the front panel, obviously, you want to have the bit that's going to be on the inside facing upwards. We're going to join the shoulder seams together. So along the tops of the jumper across this line and the same over on this line. We're going to join them together. You can crochet them together if you want. I'm going to use a yarn needle and my yarn. And remember, we did leave a long tail there as well on the back panel, so you can use that to do this. And sorry about the box, but this is the only way I could do it, okay? So I've got my yarn needle and I'm going to use my long tail, or you can just grab some more yarn. So with the wrong side facing upwards, we're going to join these 2 edges together. And I'm just going to show you how I do that. So starting off, obviously I've got my yarn already attached to the corner. I'm just going to insert my needle into the corner of the other panel. And then from there, I'm going to go into the next stitch across, push the needle through, and then put it through the other side in the next stitch across as well. Pull the yarn, and then I kind of bring the needle back to the same side again into the next stitch across, through the other panel in the next stitch across, pull tight, go into the next stitch. So rather than going like a snake back and forth in like an S shape, I kind of go around and around. But you can do this in whatever way you prefer. This is just the way that I like to do it. And you're just going to complete that going all the way across the tops of the shoulders. Make sure you do both sides the same. And like I said, if you prefer to crochet this, then go for it. Once you have done both shoulders and you've closed up those gaps and you've fastened it nice and tightly, you can try it on your jumper just to make sure that you're happy with everything before we move on. So now if you fold your work over, we're going to attach a sleeve, so just make sure your work is nice and flat. You want the bottom seams to line up perfectly. Grab a sleeve and 2 stitch markers. I'm just using bobby pins. And then we're going to line up the sleeve perpendicular to the body, and you want to make sure that the folded over edge of the sleeve goes right to the top of the folded over edge of the shoulders where we just did that seam in. And then the decreases are going to be at the bottom of the sleeve, so that's going to go under your arm. Make sure everything's nice and neat and everything's lined up evenly, and then you're going to grab your stitch markers and you're going to attach the sleeve to the body where they currently lie. So the 2 edges of the sleeve are going to be attached to the main body. So obviously the bit that's on top is going to attach to the front, and the bit of the sleeve that's on the bottom is going to attach to the back. And then you should be able to open your jumper back up, and that will leave you with a nice gap in between the body and the sleeve. And you basically need to seam up from one stitch marker to the other. Using the same method as you did before, you want to close up this gap, but you also need to make sure that you have the wrong side facing up. So you actually want to do it with your work like this. Once you have attached both sleeves in the same way, your work should be looking something like this. Now for the final and best part of the seaming, because it makes something flat into something actually wearable. So fold over your work again at the shoulder seams and kind of just set up your jumper so it would look like what it will look like when it's finished and when you can wear it. So I'm just lining up the bottom hems and then lining up the sleeves, make sure the cuffs are lined up, the under the armpits is lined up as well. You're going to start at the wrist and you're going to work your way up towards the armpit and then down towards the bottom of the jumper, and then repeat the same on the other side, from the wrist up the sleeve down the body. And so it is the exact same. You can crochet it if you want, take your time with it, but I've just done a little bit of my sleeve so far and I just thought I'd show you what it looks like as I'm working up towards the armpit. But again, it's the same as what I did before. I'm just taking my time to make sure it's nice and neat because it makes the biggest difference. Once you've done that on both sides, you can turn your work right side out and we'll get started on the collar. So all of those ends are now on the inside and you want to have the back of your jumper facing you. Make a slip knot and then we're going to attach the yarn with a slip stitch to the middle back of the jumper. So just roughly find the centermost stitch at the back. You can actually see mine was not in the center at all really, but it doesn't really matter. So join with a slip stitch and then you're going to chain one. We're going to single crochet around the neckline. So I'm going to leave on the screen how many stitches you need to do, but you want to evenly spread out these stitches. As you work your way around the back, you're obviously going to then come around to the side, and this is going to be working into the ends of the rows. So you just try to evenly spread these stitches out as much as you can. Having the right amount of stitches is crucial for the next part, so really try and get the right amount of stitches if you can, and just count as you go. When you get about halfway, you can see whether you're on track or not. When you get all the way around and you've got the right amount of stitches, you should finish right before that chain one where we started off this round, and you're just going to join with a slip stitch to that first beginning chain one. From there, we're going to chain 10. And this part of the jumper is the same as what we did for the cuff for the sleeve, but we're just going to go around instead of across. So half double crochet in the third chain from the hook and then down that chain. Now there is a slight difference. So I've worked all the way down the chain, but this time we're going to do 4 slip stitches instead of the 3 that we did before. So into the next available stitch with a slip stitch, that's 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Turn your work just as we did for the sleeve. Make sure the loop on your hook is not too loose. You can see there mine's pretty loose, so I need to pull it tighter. You're going to skip over those 4 slip stitches and go into the next available half double crochet stitch into the back loop only with a half double crochet. Then continue with half double crochets in the back loop only across that row, again making sure that you get into the very last stitch. You always want to have 9 half double crochet stitches, and that includes the beginning chain 2. When you get to the end of that row, chain 2 and turn your work, and then we're going to go into the next stitch in the back loop only with a half double crochet. Work your way across that row. You want a total of 9 half double crochet stitches, and that includes the beginning chain 2, and it's the exact same for the sleeve. So then when you get back down and you've done those 9 half double crochet stitches, you then again slip stitch into the next 4 available stitches that are around the neckline. So those single crochet stitches that we did around the neckline, that's what we're going into. So you can see now next available stitch is this one here. So we'll do 4 slip stitches, and the reason I'm going quite quickly with this, guys, is because you've already done it for the sleeve, so I feel like I don't need to slow it down. Turn the work, skip over those 4 slip stitches. You're going to half double crochet into the next half double crochet stitch that is available into the back loop only, and then half double crochet across the row, and just keep repeating those steps. So then you'll chain 2, turn, half double crochet across, slip stitch in the next 4, turn, and then repeat again and again. Make sure you always have 9 half double crochet stitches in every row, and you're just going to work your way around the neckline. Now, just like with the sleeve, depending on what size you're making, you will have a different amount of stitches left at this point. If you're making small, medium, large, extra large, or 2XL, your work is going to look the exact same as mine. So you can just follow the steps. What we're going to do is you should have 3 stitches left. So we'll slip stitch into those 3 stitches instead of our usual 4. And then we'll turn the work, we'll half double crochet in the back loop only into the next available half double crochet stitch and back up the row. But if you're doing 2XS, then as you work your way down the ribbon, so at this point where I've frozen the video, you should have 1 stitch left. So you're going to just slip stitch into this 1 stitch, turn, and then wait for the next instructions. If you're making the extra small, the amount of stitches that you have should work perfectly. So you should have 4 stitches left to slip stitch into. So you can slip stitch into those last 4 instead of the 3 that I'm about to do. And then you can turn your work, half double crochet in the back loop only in each stitch, back up the row. So complete those last slip stitches, whether that's 1, 3, or 4. Then you can turn your work. Like I said, if you're doing 2XS, don't do this next bit, wait for the next instruction. All other sizes, you need to do 1 more row of half double crochet back loop only up to the top of the collar. And then we're just going to join up these 2 edges, so the start of the collar and the end of the collar, with slip stitches. So you should be at the top of the collar unless you're making the size 2XS, but the instructions are still the same. You're going to insert your hook into the first stitch and then through the other side as well into the first stitch. So if you're doing any other size other than 2XS, you can just copy me, and you're just going to slip stitch so you've joined the top of the collar together, and then you're going to go into the next stitch, through the other side into the next stitch, and then slip stitch, and keep doing that as you work your way down. If you're doing the 2XS, you're just going to be doing this the same but in the opposite direction. So you're going to be working from the bottom of the collar and upwards towards the outer edge. So work your way along there, and if you're not sure or you don't feel comfortable, you can always cut the yarn, leave a tail, and use a yarn needle to close up this gap instead if you would prefer. Make sure you get all the stitches so that there's no holes or anything like that. And then once you've done the last stitch, or if you're doing 2XS, once you've got your way to the top of the collar, you can cut the yarn and fasten it into place. And then this is what your work should look like for the neckline. It should be nice and snug but also stretchy. And then this is a good point to weave in any ends if you like to weave in your ends. I personally don't even bother, to be honest. I just hide them on the inside of the jumper. Either make a pom-pom or get your ready-made pom-pom and just decide on the placement that you want for yours. I would just suggest placing it a little bit higher than where you actually want it, because when you wear the jumper, it kind of does droop down a little bit. So just take that into account when you're joining it.
Well done, guys. You should be so proud of yourselves if you made this, especially if you made it before Christmas 2025, because I did not give you much time. That takes some dedication and commitment, so give yourself a big pat on the back, and I really hope you love wearing it. I really hope you get all the compliments. Do like the video if you enjoyed it, because it really helps me and it really helps push out my channel. Subscribe if you don't want to miss any more tutorials from me, but enjoy the rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this. Bye.